The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the ground around the open grave into a slippery, freezing mess of mud. I stood there staring at the heavy mahogany casket, completely numb to the freezing water soaking through my black wool coat. Inside that box was Harrison, my husband. The only man who had ever truly understood me. The only real family I had ever known. He died suddenly of a massive heart attack just 3 days ago, and my entire world had been violently ripped apart. I am 34 years old. I am a forensic accountant who spends her life putting broken numbers back together, but standing there in the cemetery, I felt completely shattered. I thought the people standing around me, holding their black umbrellas, were there to hold me up. My blood relatives. My father, Victor, stood to my left, his posture stiff and formal. My mother, Evelyn, was next to him, complaining in a harsh whisper about how the mud was ruining her expensive designer heels. On my right was my older sister, Samantha, who kept subtly checking the screen of her cell phone, clearly bored out of her mind. And leaning against a nearby headstone, trying to look appropriately solemn but failing miserably, was my brother-in-law, Derek. Derek is a 34-year-old commercial real estate broker who always walked around like he owned the entire state of New York, even though everyone with half a brain knew his business was constantly bleeding money. They were all projecting an aura of tragic sorrow for the other funeral guests, dabbing at dry eyes with pristine white tissues. But I could feel the cold, impatient energy radiating from them. They wanted this over with. They wanted to get back to the warmth of the reception hall. Tucked deeply inside my black leather purse was a heavy, sealed manila envelope. I had received it that very morning from Mr. Donovan, Harrison's private trust attorney. For years, my family believed Harrison was just a quiet, struggling mid-level corporate manager. Harrison hated flashy displays of wealth, and he purposely kept his profound success hidden from my incredibly toxic, money-hungry relatives. But the envelope in my purse contained the unbelievable truth. Harrison had not died a struggling man. He had died a quiet titan of private equity. The documents in my bag confirmed that he had left me a private, completely liquid trust fund worth exactly $95 million, along with the absolute ownership of 2 massive commercial skyscrapers right in the heart of the Manhattan financial district. I was standing in the freezing rain, a newly minted multimillionaire, completely destroyed by grief. But in my naive, shattered heart, I actually wanted to share this blessing with them. I thought that maybe, just maybe, this tragedy would finally bring us together. I thought I could go back to my house, sit them all down in the living room, and tell them that none of us would ever have to worry about money again. I wanted to pay off Derek's failing business debts. I wanted to buy my parents the retirement home they always talked about. I wanted to take care of my family because I thought they were there to take care of me. The minister finished his final prayer. The cemetery workers began to lower the heavy casket into the cold earth. I dropped a single white rose onto the polished wood, watching it disappear into the darkness. I turned away, the numbness spreading from my chest all the way down to my fingertips. I told my parents I was too exhausted to attend the crowded reception at the country club. I just wanted to go home and sit in the quiet. Evelyn gave me a stiff, unnatural hug and told me they would come by the house later to check on me. I climbed into the back of a private black car, clutching my purse against my chest, completely unaware that the worst betrayal of my life was waiting for me the moment I turned my key in the front door. The ride back to my house in the suburbs took just under an hour. The driver dropped me off at the end of my long driveway, giving me a sympathetic nod as I stepped out into the pouring rain. I walked up to the large oak front door, my hands shaking so badly from the cold and the grief that it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. The house was supposed to be completely empty. But the moment the heavy door clicked open and I stepped into the dark foyer, I froze. I could hear voices. They were drifting down the long hallway from the formal living room. It was my family. They had skipped the country club reception entirely and come straight to my house. I was about to call out to them, to tell them I was home, but the sound of Derek's voice cut through the silence like a serrated knife. He was laughing. A loud, arrogant, deep-bellied laugh on the exact same day we had just put my husband into the ground. The guy was a complete fool, Derek said loudly, the sharp clink of a glass echoing in the room. I could smell the distinct odor of Harrison's expensive scotch floating down the hallway. Harrison drops dead and leaves Rachel with absolutely nothing but a massive mortgage she cannot even afford to pay on her single accountant's salary. The banks are going to tear her apart. I stopped breathing. The wet fabric of my coat clung to my skin like ice. I pressed my back against the wall of the foyer, completely hidden in the shadows, listening to the people I shared DNA with eagerly scavenging my dead husband's remains. It actually works out perfectly for us, Derek continued, his tone practically vibrating with greed. I have the legal paperwork right here in my briefcase. It is a full emergency power of attorney. My firm is drowning. We need a massive cash injection by the end of the month or I am bankrupt. If we get Rachel to sign this paper today, I get total legal control over this property. I can leverage the equity in this house, take out a massive commercial loan, and save my brokerage. Exactly, my sister Samantha chimed in. Her voice was dripping with absolute entitlement. Rachel does not need a 4-bedroom house all to herself anyway. She can go rent a cheap, tiny apartment downtown. Derek needs the capital to save his business, and honestly, we deserve a cut of the house sale for putting up with her dramatic, depressing crying all week. My stomach violently turned. I gripped the edge of the hallway console table, my knuckles turning completely white. They were not here to mourn Harrison. They were here to throw me out onto the street to fund Derek's fake, luxurious lifestyle. Then, my father, Victor, grunted in agreement. Rachel has always been weak, he said dismissively, swishing the ice around in his glass. Just put the pen in her hand, Derek. Tell her the document is to protect her from Harrison's hidden debts. She is so blinded by her grief right now, she won't even bother to read the fine print. And what if she refuses? Derek asked, a hint of nervous hesitation in his voice. She is a forensic accountant. What if she insists on looking at the numbers herself? The response came from my mother, Evelyn. Her voice was completely devoid of any maternal warmth. It was cold, calculated, and terrifying. If she fights us, we don't give her a choice, Evelyn said flatly. I have already spoken to a private doctor. We can file an emergency petition for a conservatorship. We will tell the family court that she has suffered a severe psychotic break from the grief. We will declare her legally insane, have her committed to a quiet psychiatric facility, and take permanent control of her estate as her legal guardians. Either she signs the paper nicely today, or we lock her up and take it anyway. My blood ran completely cold. The air in my lungs turned to ash. They were casually discussing taking away my fundamental human rights. They were willing to lock their own daughter in a psychiatric ward just to steal a house. The profound, suffocating sadness that had been weighing me down all morning instantly evaporated. It burned away in a matter of seconds, replaced by a dark, absolute, and freezing rage. They thought they were dealing with a helpless, broken widow. They had absolutely no idea they were standing in the home of a woman who was holding $95 million in liquid capital and possessed the exact skill set required to systematically dismantle their entire lives. I took a deep, silent breath in the dark hallway. I needed to play this perfectly. Being a forensic accountant meant my brain was hardwired to detect fraud, and I knew exactly how to handle hostile takeovers. But a direct confrontation right now would achieve nothing. If I walked in there and screamed at them, they would just deny everything and accelerate their insane conservatorship plan. No. They wanted to play a vicious, illegal game of deception. I decided I would let them play, and I would hand them the exact shovel they needed to dig their own federal graves. I wiped the rainwater off my face, forced my shoulders to slump, and made my hands tremble. I let out a loud, pathetic, trembling sob, pushed off the wall, and walked slowly into the living room like a lamb wandering into a den of starving wolves. The heavy oak door swung open, and I let my knees buckle just a fraction of an inch, enough to make me look like I was struggling to stand. Oh my God, I cried, covering my face with my hands. It is just so quiet without him. The house feels completely empty. Instantly, the atmosphere in the room snapped into a chilling, flawless performance of fake grief. The laughter I had heard just moments before vanished entirely, replaced by a suffocating blanket of artificial sympathy. Evelyn practically threw her glass of expensive wine onto a coaster and rushed toward me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders in a stiff, unnatural hug. "Oh, my poor sweet girl," she cooed, her voice dripping with poison. "We were just talking about how much we miss Harrison. We are so heartbroken for you, Rachel." I buried my face in her shoulder so she would not see my jaw clenching. I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Samantha walked over and patted my back with a perfectly manicured hand. "We are here for you," she said, her tone sounding exactly like she was reading a badly written script. "You don't have to worry about anything. We take care of our own." I nodded, playing the part of the fragile, shattered widow to absolute perfection. I let them guide me to the expensive leather sofa in the center of the room. As soon as I sat down, Derek stepped forward. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit and put on his best, most serious business face. "Rachel, listen to me," Derek began, his voice low and soothing. "I know this is the worst possible time to bring up finances, but as the man of the family now, I have to step up and protect you. I did some digging into Harrison's accounts. Rachel, things are bad. Harrison left you drowning in massive, unmanageable debt. The creditors are already lining up, and they are going to come after this house by the end of the week." I let out a sharp gasp, covering my mouth with both hands. "What? No, Harrison would never do that." Victor leaned forward from his armchair, pointing a thick finger at me. "You have to face reality, Rachel. The boy was a failure. He was in over his head, and now you are the one left holding the bag." Derek reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal papers. "But you do not need to panic," he said smoothly, sliding the document across the glass coffee table toward me. "I had my lawyers draft up an emergency power of attorney. It gives me the temporary legal authority to negotiate with the banks on your behalf, leverage this property, and keep the creditors from putting you out on the street. Just sign this, Rachel. Let me take the burden off your shoulders so you can just focus on grieving." He handed me a silver pen. I stared at the paper. It was a complete, unconditional transfer of financial and legal power. If a real widow signed this, she would be handing over her entire life to a predator. But my heart pounded not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of the trap I was about to spring. Years ago, Harrison and I had a long, late-night conversation in his study. Harrison knew exactly what kind of grifter Derek was. To protect our assets from my toxic family, we went to the federal authorities and officially registered a specific, altered version of our signatures. It was a honeypot signature. A deliberate, legally documented forgery that acted as a silent distress signal. If either of our names was ever signed using that specific slant, missing a key loop on the letter R, it immediately invalidated the document and flagged the transaction for a major federal fraud review. I picked up the silver pen. My hand shook violently, a final touch of theatrical flair. I looked at Derek, then at my mother, then at my sister. They were all staring at the tip of the pen like starving animals. "Thank you," I whispered, letting a single, forced tear roll down my cheek. "Thank you all for saving me." I pressed the pen to the paper. I deliberately changed the angle of my wrist. I flattened the end, skipped the loop on the R in Rachel, and finished with a sharp, jagged line that looked absolutely nothing like my real signature. I signed every single page they put in front of me, planting the seeds of their absolute destruction with every single stroke of the pen. Derek snatched the papers up the second I finished. A greedy, triumphant smile flashed across his face. "Do not worry about a thing, Rachel," he said, sliding the weaponized document into his briefcase. "I will handle everything from here." The second the brass clasp on Derek's briefcase clicked shut, the entire energy in the room shifted. The soft, sorrowful expressions vanished from my parents' faces like a heavy theater curtain dropping after the final act. The suffocating blanket of fake sympathy completely evaporated, leaving only the cold, sharp reality of their greed. Derek stood up, adjusting his tie, no longer looking at me with pity, but with the smug, arrogant satisfaction of a man who firmly believed he had just successfully conned a grieving widow out of her only home. Samantha did not even wait for me to stand up. She immediately turned on her heel and marched straight down the hallway toward my master bedroom. I stayed seated on the sofa, listening to the heavy, aggressive footsteps of my sister invading my private sanctuary. Drawers were yanked open and slammed shut. Wooden hangers scraped loudly across the metal rods in my walk-in closet. "What is she doing?" I asked, keeping my voice barely above a whisper, maintaining my facade of a broken, submissive woman. Evelyn picked up her wine glass and took a large gulp, completely dropping the loving mother act. Her tone was suddenly harsh, annoyed, and incredibly dismissive. "She is being practical, Rachel. Someone has to be. Funerals are incredibly expensive, and since your husband clearly did not leave a dime to pay for his own burial, Samantha is gathering some of your luxury items to sell. We have to cover these immediate costs somehow." I watched in stunned silence as Samantha re-emerged from the hallway. My jaw practically locked in place. She was carrying my authentic black Chanel flap bag in one hand and my Birkin in the other. Tucked under her arm was the heavy velvet jewelry box Harrison had bought me for our 5th wedding anniversary. She dropped the expensive bags onto the dining table with a careless thud and started tossing my diamond tennis bracelets, pearl necklaces, and designer sunglasses into a black plastic garbage bag she had pulled from my own kitchen. "I cannot believe you spent money on this designer garbage while Harrison was secretly drowning in debt," Samantha sneered, not even bothering to look at me as she shoved a pair of my diamond earrings into her pocket. "It is completely irresponsible. I am taking these to a consignment shop in the city tomorrow. Whatever is left over after we pay off the funeral home, we will give to Derek to put towards your massive mortgage arrears." I did not say a single word. I did not scream at her to drop my things. I did not tackle her to the floor. Even though every single instinct in my body was screaming at me to physically throw them all out into the freezing rain, I just sat there and let them steal from me. As I watched my sister shove my belongings into a trash bag, a flood of childhood memories rushed back to me. This was exactly how it had always been. I remembered being 16 years old, working double shifts at a diner to save up for college applications, only to come home and find my bedroom drawers completely emptied. Evelyn had taken every single dollar of my hard-earned tips to buy Samantha a ridiculous, custom-made pageant dress because Samantha was the golden child who deserved the very best. I was always the scapegoat. The bank. The sacrifice. Victor walked over and stood towering over me, casting a dark, heavy shadow across the couch. "Let this be a lesson to you, Rachel," he said, pointing a thick finger at my face. "We warned you about Harrison. We told you he was a dreamer with no real business sense. You should have married a smart, driven businessman like Derek. Look at him. He is running a massive commercial real estate firm, and you are sitting here about to lose the roof over your head. You should be on your knees thanking him for cleaning up your mess." Derek puffed out his chest, looking incredibly pleased with himself. "It is fine, Victor," Derek said, waving his hand dismissively. "She made her bed, but we are family. I always clean up the messes." I lowered my head, hiding my face behind my hands as if I were crying uncontrollably. Under the cover of my arms, my eyes were dry, completely focused, and burning with absolute lethal intent. I let them take the physical items. I let them steal the Chanel bags and the diamonds because those cheap material things were absolutely nothing compared to the catastrophic financial execution I was preparing for them. 30 minutes later, the heavy oak front door finally clicked shut behind them. I stood quietly at the living room window, pulling the heavy curtain back just a fraction of an inch. I watched Derek casually toss the black garbage bag filled with my diamond jewelry and designer handbags into the trunk of his least luxury sedan. Samantha climbed into the passenger seat, already pulling down the vanity mirror to reapply her bright pink lip gloss, completely unbothered by the fact that she had just robbed her grieving sister blind. My parents climbed into their own SUV, not once looking back at the house to see if I was okay. They drove away, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of my empty home. The exact moment their tail lights disappeared around the corner of the street, my posture instantly straightened. The trembling, helpless widow act vanished completely from my face, replaced by the sharp, analytical focus of a licensed forensic accountant preparing for war. I walked straight to the digital security panel on the wall. I bypassed the standard alarm and activated the military-grade perimeter security system Harrison had installed years ago. I locked every deadbolt, engaged the reinforced window locks, and activated the high-definition hidden cameras scattered throughout the living room and foyer. Then, I walked into my home office, opened my encrypted laptop, and picked up my secure work phone. I bypassed the standard lines and called my Manhattan trust attorney, Mr. Donovan, directly. He answered on the second ring. "Rachel," Mr. Donovan said, his tone highly professional but laced with a deep understanding of the gravity of our situation. "I am so incredibly sorry for your loss. Are you safe?" "I am fine, Donovan," I said, my voice cold, flat, and completely devoid of tears. "But we need to move immediately. My family was just here. They are attempting a hostile takeover of my assets. They forced me to sign a forged emergency power of attorney, and my mother explicitly threatened to file a fraudulent conservatorship to have me committed to a psychiatric ward if I fight them." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Good God," Donovan whispered. "That is a nuclear legal threat. Do you want me to contact the federal authorities right now?" "Not yet," I replied, sitting down in my leather desk chair and booting up my dual monitors. They took the bait. Derek is holding the document with the registered honeypot signature. He thinks he has the legal authority to leverage my house. I want him to try and use it. I want him to commit federal bank fraud on the public record." "Understood," Donovan said smoothly, his keyboard already clicking rapidly in the background. "What are your instructions?" "Execute the trust immediately," I commanded. "I want full, absolute control of the liquid assets by tomorrow morning. I want the accounts formally transferred to my primary holding company, and I want my personal net worth officially updated on the private banking registries to $95 million. Furthermore, I want the deeds to the 2 Wall Street commercial skyscrapers legally registered entirely under my name without a single second of delay." "Consider it done," Donovan replied without hesitation. "The federal courts are already processing the digital signatures you provided earlier this week. As of midnight tonight, you are officially one of the wealthiest private commercial landlords in the New York financial district." I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the cold, hard reality of my new, terrifying power wash over me. "There is one more thing, Mr. Donovan," I said, leaning closer to my computer screen. "I need you to pull the complete tenant manifesto for the commercial building located at number 14 Wall Street. I need you to verify the active lease agreement for a specific commercial real estate brokerage operating on the 4th floor." "Pulling the master lease agreement now," Donovan said. A few seconds later, I heard him hum in confirmation. "I have it. The tenant occupying the entire 4th floor suite is a commercial real estate brokerage registered under the name Derek." I actually smiled for the first time since Harrison passed away. It was a vicious, calculating smile. The ghost of my brilliant husband had just handed me the perfect weapon, and I was absolutely ready to swing the hammer. "Tell me everything about his lease, Mr. Donovan," I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the blank screens of my monitors. "It is a standard premium commercial lease," Donovan explained, the sound of digital pages flipping echoing over the phone line. "But Rachel, your brother-in-law has been struggling incredibly badly for a very long time. His firm is currently 2 full months behind on rent. The previous property management company gave him a temporary, unofficial grace period because he aggressively promised them that a massive influx of capital was coming by the end of this month." A massive influx of capital. I repeated the words out loud in the quiet of my office. My blood began to boil all over again. He was talking about the money he planned to steal from my house using that forged power of attorney. He fully intended to strip me of my only home, throw me out onto the street, and leverage my equity just to keep his failing, fraudulent business afloat for a few more pathetic months. "Mr. Donovan," I asked, my forensic accountant instincts kicking into high gear. "Read the fine print of the default parameters. Look for the operational expense penalties." There was a brief silence on the line as the seasoned lawyer scanned the dense legal text. "You are brilliant, Rachel," Donovan suddenly chuckled, the sound dry and sharp. "I see it. There is an incredibly obscure, ironclad operating expense penalty clause buried deep within his specific contract. It legally allows the landlord to immediately triple the monthly rent if the tenant defaults on their payments for more than 60 consecutive days." "And what day of delinquency is he currently on?" I asked. "He is currently at day 62, Donovan confirmed. The universe had just perfectly aligned to deliver absolute justice. Derek thought he was holding a gun to my head with that fake power of attorney, but he was actually standing on a trapdoor, and I was the one holding the heavy metal lever. "Mr. Donovan," I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of mercy. "I want you to draft a new, formal rent invoice for the 4th floor of number 14 Wall Street. I want you to activate that clause and triple his monthly rent immediately. Add all the accumulated late fees, apply the maximum allowed state penalties, and include an immediate, non-negotiable demand for the massive arrears." "Understood," Donovan said, his tone entirely professional and ruthlessly efficient. "And what deadline should we give him to pay this new, astronomical amount?" 72 hours, I replied instantly. "Deliver the aggressive legal notice directly to his office's glass doors by tomorrow morning. Tape it right at eye level where every other tenant on the floor can see it. If he cannot produce the money by the end of the week, I want you to initiate a full commercial lockout. Seize his office. Seize his expensive desktop computers. Seize his filing cabinets, and most importantly, seize his private servers containing all of his accounting data." "It will be my absolute pleasure to serve the notice, Rachel," Donovan said before hanging up the phone. I placed my cell phone on my mahogany desk and stared out the window into the dark, rainy night. The very first chess piece had been officially moved. I was no longer just watching from the shadows as a passive, grieving victim. I was actively, systematically dismantling Derek's entire livelihood. And the absolute best part of this entire situation was that Derek still firmly believed I was sitting on my living room couch, sobbing over my stolen handbags, completely helpless and at his mercy. He thought he was untouchable. He had absolutely no idea that his landlord, his executioner, and his victim were all the exact same person. I spent the rest of the night securely backing up my computer systems and preparing my house for the inevitable storm. The eviction notice would hit his door in the morning, and I knew exactly how a cornered, desperate narcissist would react. He would come back to my house looking for fast cash, and when he did, I would be waiting to capture every single one of his federal crimes on camera. Thank you for watching this far. If you found this story interesting, please like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next parts, and don't forget to leave a comment telling us the name of the city you live in. Every comment you leave helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. Exactly 2 days later, the doorbell of my suburban house rang sharply. I was sitting at my kitchen island, calmly drinking a cup of dark roast coffee, reviewing the digital confirmation on my laptop that the rent increase and eviction warning had been successfully delivered to Derek's office in Manhattan. The timing was almost poetic. I tapped the security application on my tablet to see who was standing on my front porch. It was Derek. He was pacing back and forth across the brick pathway, furiously typing on his cell phone, looking far more stressed and agitated than he had during his previous visit. His tie was loosened, and he was sweating despite the cool morning air. But he was not alone. Standing slightly behind him was a short, sweaty man wearing a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit that looked like it had been bought off a discount rack. He held a battered leather briefcase and kept nervously wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. I set my coffee mug down. Before walking to the door, I opened the smart home control panel on my encrypted phone and verified that the 3 hidden, high-definition cameras in my living room were actively recording audio and video directly to my secure cloud server. Because of my job dealing with hostile corporate audits, Harrison had military-grade surveillance discreetly integrated into the smoke detectors and the bookshelves. The red recording dots blinked back at me. The stage was perfectly set. I opened the front door, making sure to drop my shoulders, widening my eyes to put on the tired, anxious face of a grieving widow. "What is going on?" I asked softly, sounding perfectly intimidated. Derek pushed past me without a word, stepping aggressively right into the foyer, forcing me to step backward. The sweaty man in the cheap suit scurried in right behind him. "We need to talk right now, Rachel," Derek said, his voice tight, angry, and heavily laced with panic. I closed the door and followed them into the living room. Derek immediately threw a manila folder onto the glass coffee table with a loud, violent smack. The cheap lawyer cleared his throat, trying to project a sense of legal authority that he clearly did not possess. "Mrs. Rachel," the man said, pulling a crumpled business card from his pocket and dropping it on the table. "My name is Mitchell Reed. I am the senior legal counsel representing your brother-in-law and his commercial real estate firm. We are here regarding a massive, outstanding debt your late husband left behind." I looked from the greasy lawyer to Derek, widening my eyes in feigned panic. "What debt?" "Derek, you said you were going to handle the external creditors with the power of attorney." Derek unbuttoned his suit jacket and sneered, pointing a finger at the folder. "I am handling the external creditors, Rachel. But this is an internal matter." He reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, slamming his hand down on it. "This is a promissory note. 2 years ago, Harrison came begging to me for a massive, under-the-table loan to keep his worthless startup ideas afloat. He borrowed $2 million directly from my company's operating funds." I stared at the paper on the table. Even from a distance, my forensic accountant instincts were screaming. I slowly sat down on the sofa and leaned forward to inspect the document. It was entirely, laughably fake. The formatting was completely wrong for a commercial promissory note. The amortization schedule made absolutely no mathematical sense, and the interest rate they had typed in clearly violated state usury laws. But the most hilarious part was Harrison's supposed signature at the bottom. It was a crude, shaky tracing that looked like it had been copied directly off a birthday card by a child. $2 million, I whispered, keeping my hands trembling as I touched the edge of the paper. "I do not understand. Harrison never mentioned this to me." Derek leaned over the coffee table, getting dangerously close to my face. The arrogance radiating from him was nauseating, but beneath it, I could see the frantic, absolute desperation of a man whose business rent had just been legally tripled overnight. "Of course he didn't tell you, Rachel. He was a liar. And now my firm is taking a massive financial hit because of your dead husband. I expect to be made whole immediately. I know you have personal retirement accounts and emergency savings. Wire me every single dollar of liquid cash you currently possess by tomorrow morning to stabilize my company, or my lawyer here will use that power of attorney to start the eviction and liquidation process on your house on Friday." It was textbook extortion. He was using a forged legal document to threaten me out of my personal life savings, completely unaware that the hidden cameras were capturing every single frame of his federal crime in crystal clear resolution. I sat motionless on the sofa, staring blankly at the forged promissory note, my mind racing to process Derek's criminal act. I took a deep breath, feigning a tremor, and looked up at Derek with eyes brimming with fake tears. $2 million, Derek?" I whispered, my voice trembling dramatically. "I don't understand. How can a real estate company like yours have $2 million in cash readily available to lend to Harrison without depleting your own operating capital? Federal banking regulations are very strict." Derek snorted contemptuously, as if offended by my questioning his financial capabilities. He buttoned his cheap vest, puffed out his chest, and began pacing around my living room. He was putting on a show for me, for Samantha, and inadvertently for the 3 high-resolution cameras recording his every word. "That's because you don't understand high-level commercial finance, Rachel," Derek boasted, his voice echoing with self-importance. "When you're a big shot in New York real estate, liquidity is just a matter of creative accounting." When Harrison came crying to me for help, I knew I couldn't just write him a personal check. That would trigger too many red flags. So I set up a chain of shell companies in Delaware. I borrowed numerous commercial credit lines under my brokerage firm's name, inflating the value of the existing real estate portfolio to secure those loans. My heart leaped with joy. Inflating the value of an asset to secure a loan, that's classic bank fraud, a federal crime. "And the banks just give you the money?" I asked, feigning utter astonishment at his intelligence. "Of course they gave it to me," Derek laughed, completely intoxicated by his own self-delusional intelligence. "Because I know how to manipulate the system. I falsified appraisal reports. I showed the banks projected revenue streams that didn't even exist. Once the cash flowed into my main operating account, I immediately transferred it across states to the shell companies I'd created. By circulating the money through 3 different states, I effectively laundered the source of the funds before transferring it to your late husband." "It left absolutely no trace," he declared proudly. "But I knew better than that. Transferring the proceeds of the cross-state fraud was freight fraud and money laundering, federal offenses that carry sentences of up to 20 years in prison each." And he was confessing it loudly, clearly, and proudly right in my living room. His lawyer, Mitchell Reed, seemed agitated. He nervously cleared his throat, trying to interrupt Derek's speech. "Derek," he muttered. "Perhaps we shouldn't be discussing the specific monopolistic mechanisms in your business." Derek waved his hand dismissively, shutting down his own lawyer's advice. "Relax, Mitchell. She's a grieving widow, not a FBI agent. Besides, she needs to understand exactly how much I risked to save Harrison. I put myself in a noose, Rachel. I manipulated federal bank documents to save your family, and now my creative accounting is under fire. The banks are asking questions, and I need that capital back in my account immediately to cover up the paperwork." Samantha crossed her arms, looking at me with utter disgust. "So you see, Rachel, Derek really is a hero. He broke the rules to help Harrison, and now you're acting like we're the bad guys just to get your own money back. You should be kneeling down and thanking him." I lowered my head, staring at my thighs, concealing the fiery look of triumph in my eyes. I had it. I had the complete verbal confession. He had just admitted to bank fraud, postage fraud, and money laundering, all to construct a fabricated story for a forged $2 million promissory note. It was a masterpiece of self-destruction. I took a long, trembling breath and looked back at Derek. "Okay," I whispered, my voice thick with feigned defeat. "Okay, Derek, you win. I can't fight you. I can't lose this house." Derek smirked, a genuine sense of victory radiating from every pore of his body. "I thought you'd understand the truth eventually." "I just need a little more time," I pleaded. "I need to go to the bank tomorrow morning. I'll withdraw all my savings and emergency funds. I'll give you the cash to stabilize the company. Just promise me you won't let Mitchell seize my house." Derek walked over and patted me on the shoulder in a condescending manner. "Just get that transfer into my account before noon tomorrow, and you'll get to keep the house for another month. See? I told you I always take care of my family." They turned their backs and headed for the front door. Mitchell Reed was practically running out of the house. I remained seated on the sofa, watching them leave. Derek thought he had just secured the funding to save his failing real estate company. He didn't know his company had been legally locked out for failing to pay rent, and he certainly didn't know he had just given a forensic accountant a full confession of multiple federal crimes. Samantha pointed a manicured finger toward a small, dimly lit 2-person table situated near the swinging kitchen doors, far away from the main celebration. "If you insist on staying and embarrassing yourself, you can sit over there," she ordered loudly, ensuring a few of the nearby guests heard her. Do not talk to Derek's investors and do not order anything expensive. I am not paying for your charity meal. I did not argue. I did not cry. I simply smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile that made her blink in confusion. Thank you, Samantha, I said gracefully. That table looks absolutely perfect. I walked over to the small table in the back and sat down. Samantha turned back to her guests, rolling her eyes and acting like the gracious hostess who had just dealt with a crazy relative. A young, sharply dressed waiter approached my table almost immediately, looking slightly apologetic for my seating arrangement. Can I get you a glass of tap water, ma'am? He asked gently. Actually, I said, keeping my voice clear and loud enough to carry across the room. I would like to order a bottle of champagne to celebrate my brother-in-law's success. Do you have the 2008 vintage Louis Roederer Cristal? The waiter blinked, clearly caught off guard. We do, ma'am, but that bottle is $4,000. Perfect, I replied. I will take it. And please keep the tab open under my name. I opened my clutch and pulled out the heavy, solid metal black card issued exclusively by the Manhattan trust firm to clients with ultra-high net worth accounts. I placed it gently on the waiter's silver tray. The card hit the metal surface with a distinct, heavy clink. It was not a standard credit card. It was a solid titanium wealth management card exclusively minted for individuals holding liquid assets north of $50 million. The waiter looked down at the card and his entire posture instantly transformed. He recognized the insignia immediately. Right away, madam, the waiter said, bowing his head with deep reverence. I will bring it out immediately. As the waiter hurried away, I looked across the room. Derek and Samantha were staring at me, their faces suddenly tight with confusion. They had heard the price of the champagne. They had seen the waiter's dramatic shift in behavior. The first tiny seed of panic had just been planted in their minds. Derek excused himself from his group of wealthy investors and practically marched over to my small table. His eyes were locked on my hands, searching for that card. He slammed his palms down on my table, leaning in close so the other guests would not hear. What was that? Derek demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. What kind of card did you just give that waiter, Rachel? Do not lie to me. I calmly picked up my cloth napkin and placed it on my lap. I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about, Derek. It is just a standard bank rewards card. Do not play games with me. Derek hissed, his face turning red with sudden suspicion. You said you were broke. You said your accounts were frozen. Are you spending the money you owe me on $4,000 champagne? He reached across the table, his hand darting out to try and snatch my purse. I swiftly moved it out of his reach. I suggest you lower your voice, Derek. You are making a scene in front of your very important investors. Now, please go back to your party. You are interrupting my dinner. Derek glared at me, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. He turned on his heel and stormed back to the main table, grabbing a fresh glass of whiskey and downing it in one gulp. A few minutes later, the waiter returned reverently carrying the chilled bottle of Cristal. He poured it flawlessly. I took a slow, luxurious sip. It tasted exactly like victory. Then it happened. Right in the middle of a pompous toast being given by my father, Victor, Derek's cell phone buzzed loudly on the table. He picked it up, expecting a congratulatory message. Instead, I watched his expression morph from mild annoyance to absolute, unadulterated terror. The color drained from his face so quickly he looked like he was going to pass out. I knew exactly what that email said. My contacts at the Federal Fraud Prevention Unit had updated the status of his fraudulent loan application. The subject line read, Urgent Notice of Federal Review and Asset Verification. Derek began to sweat profusely. He tugged at his collar, suddenly suffocating. The email demanded immediate in-person authentication of the power of attorney document to clear the federal block. He was trapped. His rent was due in less than 24 hours, his office was about to be locked down, and his stolen money was now permanently locked inside an active federal investigation vault. The morning after the disastrous dinner party, I sat in my home office at 6 a.m, staring at the live security feed from number 14 Wall Street. As the digital clock on my monitor flipped to 6:01, I picked up my phone and called the head of property security. "Execute the lockout," I said simply. Through the camera, I watched a team of 3 uniformed security guards and a master locksmith step off the elevator onto the 4th floor. Within 10 minutes, the electronic key card readers on Derek's glass double doors were deactivated. Heavy steel deadbolts were replaced. A massive, glaring red notice of commercial property seizure was taped directly to the glass, right over the gold lettering of Derek's firm. The notice formally declared that due to the failure to satisfy the outstanding rent and the triggered penalty clauses, the landlord had officially taken possession of the premises. Every single item inside that office, the computers, the servers containing his fraudulent ledgers, now legally belonged to me. At 8:45, the elevator doors opened. Derek stepped out, looking dreadful. His suit was wrinkled, and he had heavy bags under his eyes. He marched up to his office doors and swiped his key card. Red. He swiped it again. Red. He yanked the handles violently. The doors were sealed shut. Then he finally looked up and read the notice. I watched the exact moment his entire world collapsed. He dropped his briefcase, and papers spilled everywhere. He began pounding his fists against the thick glass, screaming, "Open the door! Open the door right now!" 2 armed security guards stepped off the elevator and approached him. "Mr. Jackson," the lead guard said, "you need to step away. You are officially locked out for failure to pay rent. You are trespassing. You cannot do this." Derek screamed, his eyes wild. "I have a massive federal loan clearing this week. Let me inside to get my servers. I just need my hard drives." He wasn't worried about furniture. He was panicked because those servers held the evidence the FBI would be looking for. "The physical assets have been legally seized by the building ownership," the guard explained. "If you try to force entry, we will have you arrested for burglary." Derek looked like he was going to throw a punch, but he realized he was outmatched. He was marched through the lobby by armed security in front of dozens of financial professionals. He stumbled out onto the sidewalk, a king exiled from a fake kingdom. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, undoubtedly calling my parents to demand they accelerate the conservatorship hearing. He had no idea I was the one holding the keys to his life. An hour later, my office phone rang. My front desk receptionist sounded stressed. "Rachel, your parents are in the lobby. They are threatening to call security if you don't see them." I walked out to the reception area. Victor and Evelyn were pacing the marble floor, looking completely out of place in their country club attire. When Evelyn saw me, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and dragged me into a glass conference room. Victor slammed the door and threw a thick leather binder onto the table. "Sit down, Rachel," Victor commanded. "We are done playing games." I remained standing. "I am at work. You have 3 minutes." Evelyn let out a harsh laugh. "You are in no position to make demands. You embarrassed this family last night. You tried to humiliate Derek while he is working to save you. He called us in tears because his office was illegally locked down because you failed to authorize the bank transfer." Victor tapped the binder. "This is your wake-up call. It is an emergency petition for a conservatorship." The word hung in the air like poison. A conservatorship, the legal mechanism used to strip a person of their basic human rights, handing control of their finances and medical decisions to a guardian. "We have spoken to a judge and a psychiatric evaluator," Victor boasted. "They agree your behavior indicates a grief-induced psychotic break. If you don't wire that $500,000 to Derek by noon today, we are filing this petition at 1 o'clock. The court will freeze your accounts and appoint us as your permanent legal guardians." Evelyn smiled. "Once we are in control, Rachel, we will authorize the sale of your house ourselves. We will pay Derek what he is owed and put you in a quiet residential facility where you can get the psychiatric help you need. You won't have access to a credit card or a phone without our permission. They were not just trying to steal my money anymore, they were trying to erase my existence. They were willing to lock me in a ward to fund their golden child's lifestyle. You have until noon, Victor threatened. Wire the money or lose your freedom. They walked out, leaving the binder. I waited until they were in the elevator, then I sprinted into the hallway. Wait. I called out, letting my voice crack with manufactured panic. Please don't do this. The smug satisfaction on their faces was sickening. I forced my hands to shake. Please, Mom, I'm just stressed. If you take away my rights, I'll lose my job. Just give me more time. We are doing this for your own good, Evelyn stated coldly. I promise I will behave. I begged, burying my face in my hands. The elevator doors slid shut on their arrogant glares. The second they were gone, my tears stopped. My posture straightened. I walked back to my office and called Mr. Donovan. They just served the conservatorship threat, I told him. They're filing at 1 o'clock. Rachel, that's dangerous, Donovan warned. We should file an injunction. No, I replied. Do not block it. I want them to file it. Why? Donovan asked, silent for a moment. Because to grant a conservatorship, the petitioners must prove they are responsible fiduciaries. They have to submit their own financial disclosures and tax returns to the federal court under penalty of perjury. My parents have been funneling money to Derek for years. If they file this, they are voluntarily handing their financial history to a judge right as the FBI is closing in. It is a legal suicide mission. I could hear Donovan chuckle. They're dragging you into a dark alley to rob you, not realizing they're dragging you onto a brightly lit federal stage where you hold all the evidence. Exactly, I said. Let them dig the hole as deep as they can. By 1 o'clock, Donovan confirmed the petition had been filed. The hearing was set for the end of the week. Almost immediately, my phone began to vibrate aggressively. Samantha had taken her performance public. I opened my social media feed and saw a video of her sitting on the floor, no makeup, clutching a tissue. My sister Rachel is going through a severe mental health crisis, she whimpered to her followers. She has lost her grip on reality. She is actively trying to destroy my family out of spite. My parents are trying to get her legally committed to keep her safe. The video went viral in our local circles. My extended family unleashed a torrent of abuse. My aunt left a voicemail calling me a psychotic wretch. Former classmates told me I belonged in a padded room. They wanted me to show up to the hearing as a sobbing wreck to match the profile they built. I didn't care. I put my phone in a drawer and locked it. I only cared about the truth hidden in the numbers. For the next 3 days, I performed a deep forensic audit of Derek's entire history. I found a staggering web of fraud. Derek's entire career was a Ponzi scheme. He had been moving money between 6 shell corporations in Delaware, creating fake revenue to secure loans to pay off old ones. He was completely insolvent. And my parents? I discovered they had secretly taken out second mortgages on their own home to bail him out 2 years ago. That's why they were so desperate to steal my house. If Derek went down, he was taking them with him. The 72-hour lockout deadline expired at 6 in the morning on Thursday. After Derek was escorted out, I knew he would be frantic. At 2 in the afternoon, my smart home system sent a perimeter breach alert. I opened the live feed on my tablet. There, creeping across my back lawn, were Derek and Samantha. They looked feral. Derek was still in his wrinkled suit from the lockout, his tie gone, sweating in the cool air. Samantha was in dark athletic wear, looking over her shoulder. Derek picked up a large decorative stone from my garden and smashed it through the reinforced glass of my back patio door. The sound echoed through my tablet. He reached his bleeding arm through the hole and unlocked the deadbolt. Good heavens, Rachel, Donovan whispered as he watched with me. I'll call the local police. They can be there in 3 minutes. No, I said firmly. A simple breaking and entering charge is too small. I want this on the federal record to prove their absolute financial desperation. Let them dig. I tracked them through the house. They were tearing through my belongings like drug addicts. Samantha sprinted to my bedroom, yanking clothes off hangers and shoving my remaining shoes and silver frames into a black garbage bag. Downstairs, Derek destroyed my home office, dumping files and smashing a small metal lockbox with a brass paperweight. It was empty. I had moved everything to a vault days ago. Derek let out a scream of frustration. He grabbed my backup laptop, a cheap, wiped machine, and shoved it under his arm. They scrambled across the lawn and over the fence like common thieves. They had committed felony burglary just to steal maybe $1,000 worth of pawnable items. I saved the high-definition video and forwarded it to Agent Garrett at the FBI. The federal case was now absolutely airtight. Friday morning arrived with a cold wind. I stood outside the federal courthouse, smoothed my charcoal gray suit, and walked inside. When I stepped out of the elevator, I saw them. Victor and Evelyn were dressed in brand new designer clothes, purchased on high-interest credit cards, I'm sure, trying to look like responsible pillars of the community. Samantha was holding Derek's arm. Derek was in a fresh suit, trying to hide the twitchy energy of a cornered animal. Standing with them was Dr. Felix Caldwell, the corrupt psychiatric evaluator they had hired to declare me insane. Well, look who decided to show up, Victor sneered as I approached. We thought you might have locked yourself in after your little meltdown. I wouldn't miss this for the world, Dad, I said smoothly. You should have just wired the money, Rachel, Samantha hissed. Now you're going to lose everything. Dr. Caldwell is going to explain to the judge exactly how far gone you are. We're taking control of your house by 5 o'clock today. Derek leaned in, his breath smelling of stale coffee. It's over. You're walking out of here as a legal ward of the state. I looked into his bloodshot eyes. He was so stupid. He had no idea federal agents were already stationed inside the building. The doors opened, and the bailiff called our case. I followed them into the courtroom, ready to burn their world down. I sat at the empty defense table. Across the aisle, their lawyer, Mitchell Reed, put on a face of deep concern. Your Honor, Reed began, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. We are here because a family is trying to save one of their own. Since the passing of her husband, Rachel has suffered a catastrophic break from reality. He paced back and forth, painting me as a woman unhinged. He called Dr. Caldwell to the stand. The doctor, without ever having spoken to me, diagnosed me with acute grief-induced psychosis. She is an immediate danger to her own financial well-being, he stated gravely. I recommend her parents be granted full conservatorship. Then Derek took the stand. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore his oath. He sat down with a smug grin. It's a tragedy, Derek told the judge. Harrison was a terrible businessman. He died leaving Rachel in massive debt. He begged me for a $2 million loan, which I gave him because we are family. Now Rachel's delusions have made her paranoid. She thinks I am trying to steal from her while I am just trying to save her home. It was textbook perjury. Every syllable was a documented lie spoken under oath. No further questions, Mitchell Reed said. The judge, a stern woman named Miller, turned to me. Rachel, you have elected to represent yourself. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I reached out and placed my hand on the brass lock of my briefcase. The metallic click echoed like a loaded weapon. I stood up, my hands perfectly steady. Yes, Your Honor. I have a comprehensive defense against every single one of these fabricated allegations. Judge Miller looked skeptical. She had just heard I was a hysterical, mentally broken widow. But I was speaking with the authority of a seasoned executive. The petitioners claim I am suffering from financial delusions, I continued. They argue that I am drowning in debt. However, one does not need a psychiatric evaluation to disprove a financial delusion. One simply needs empirical, documented proof of reality. I held out a manila folder. The bailiff carried it to the judge. Mitchell Reed jumped up. Objection. She has no legal counsel. This could be a forged bank statement. Sit down, Mr. Reed, the judge snapped. Judge Miller opened the folder. Inside was the certified portfolio from Manhattan Trust, embossed with gold seals and anti-fraud watermarks. I watched her eyes scan the first page. The stern look vanished. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked at me with absolute astonishment. Miss Rachel, Judge Miller said, her voice dropping. Are these figures accurate? Are you presenting this as a current statement of your personal financial solvency? They are entirely accurate, Your Honor, I replied, aimed squarely at my family. Are you telling this court, the judge began, that you are the sole beneficiary of a trust totaling $95 million? I am, I replied. And as you will see on page 4, the trust includes absolute ownership of 2 commercial skyscrapers in the Manhattan Financial District. My husband was a brilliant investor who secured my future. I have no debt. I have no need for a conservator. A collective gasp escaped from the family table. Samantha covered her mouth. Evelyn looked like she had been physically struck. Mr. Reed, the judge said sharply, looking at Derek. If your client is the successful broker he testified to being, and if he loaned Harrison $2 million, then why does this financial statement list him as a delinquent tenant? Reed froze. Excuse me? If you turn to page 7, Your Honor, I said smoothly, you will find the tenant manifesto for 14 Wall Street. As the new owner, I recently executed a commercial lockout. The tenant on the 4th floor had defaulted on their lease. They were 62 days behind on rent. I seized their servers yesterday morning. Judge Miller fixed a laser beam gaze on Derek. The delinquent tenant listed here is a brokerage registered to Derek. The color drained from Derek's face. He slumped back, his breath rushing out in a gasp. He finally understood. It wasn't a faceless landlord. It was me. You stood there under oath and testified you were a wealthy savior, I said, looking at him with freezing contempt. But the reality is, you are a failed broker who couldn't even pay rent in a building that I own. You perjured yourself to try and steal my home to cover your own failures. Victor tried to speak, but the words died. I didn't give them a moment. I reached back into my briefcase. I would like to submit Exhibit B. This is a copy of a power of attorney Derek presented to a bank 3 days ago to secure a $500,000 loan against my house. Objection. Reed screamed. Sit down, the judge roared. Proceed, Rachel. To authenticate this, I call Special Agent Garrett from the FBI to the stand. My mother let out a tiny squeak of terror. The door swung open, and Agent Garrett walked down the aisle. He swore his oath and took his seat. The signature on that document is a registered honeypot, Garrett announced. It is a legally documented forgery designed as an alert. Submitting it to a bank is felony bank fraud. Derek was violently shaking his head, muttering it was a trap. I also have a verified audio recording, I told the court. I pressed play on a digital player. Derek's voice filled the room, bragging about shell corporations, laundering money, and threatening to seize my house if I didn't wire him my savings. I pressed stop. The silence that followed was permanent. Derek had confessed to bank fraud, wire fraud, and extortion in his own words to a federal judge and an FBI agent. The judge's gavel came down with a deafening crack. The petition for conservatorship is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Judge Miller roared. And I am forwarding this transcript to the district attorney for a perjury investigation regarding Victor and Evelyn. My mother jumped. My father's face turned purple. They had volunteered their records, and now they were going to be dismantled. Agent Garrett stood up. Right on cue, he said. 2 U.S. Marshals in tactical vests entered the room. They walked straight to the petitioner's table. Derek Jackson, you are under arrest for federal bank fraud, wire fraud, and criminal extortion. Stand up. Samantha let out a blood-curdling scream, grabbing Derek's arm. No. He's a wealthy broker. Rachel is the crazy one. But Derek knew. He stood up slowly, staring blankly ahead as the handcuffs snapped shut. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The marshals marched him past me. For 1 second, he looked at me, eyes filled with tears. I didn't blink. The moment the doors slammed shut, the family turned on each other. This is your fault. Evelyn shrieked at Samantha. You and your criminal husband dragged us into this. You told us he was a genius. I lied to you? Samantha screamed back. You knew he was failing. You took a second mortgage because you were too embarrassed to admit I married a loser. You helped him plan to steal Rachel's house. They were dragged out by court officers, screaming and cursing at each other. They had completely forgotten about me. 8 months have passed. Derek was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Between the honeypot signature and the audio recording, his lawyer begged for a plea deal. Samantha's luxury life evaporated. The banks foreclosed on her house. She became a local pariah after the transcripts leaked. I heard she's living in a rundown motel, trying to pawn the very handbags she stole from me. My parents had to liquidate everything to pay legal fees and fines to avoid jail. They sold their home at a loss and were shunned by their friends. They are now trapped in a cramped apartment, bitterly screaming at each other in a misery of their own making. I sold the house in the suburbs. It held too many toxic memories. I moved my firm into the premium suite Derek was evicted from. Right now, I am standing by the windows of my new penthouse. The city lights stretch out like diamonds. The air is clean and peaceful. Harrison left me the tools, but I was the one who swung the hammer. Family is not defined by blood, it is defined by loyalty and love. When those are weaponized against you, you have no obligation to stay a victim. I took a slow sip of my wine, feeling a sense of permanent closure. The war is over, and I emerged victorious. Tell me, am I wrong for completely destroying them? Or did they just get the exact karma they begged for? Thanks for watching and listening to my story. If you've ever had to summon the courage to cut toxic relatives out of your life to protect your peace, share your story in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to join our community. See you in the next video.